In the beginning, there was only darkness and dust, a silent sea of particles swirling around a young sun. From that chaos, Earth took form, blue, fragile, alive. For billions of years, it slept. Then something began to stir. Across the endless black, the planet shimmered like a single thought, a lonely whisper in the cosmic void. If consciousness could gaze upon itself, this would be the moment it opened its eyes. A thin film of oceans and air, breathing for the first time. Clouds swirling like paint over the canvas of eternity. Who were the first civilizations to walk this planet? And what truths have been buried beneath their ruins? Every story has a beginning, but humanity's beginning is different. It is written not in books, but in bone and stone, in faint carvings left behind by those who once walked where we now stand. For every artifact we find, there are 1,000 that have vanished, swallowed by the earth, erased by time, or perhaps hidden deliberately. History tells us that civilization began 6,000 years ago, that the first cities rose from the rivers of Mesopotamia and Egypt, that before that we were hunters and wanderers bound only to survival. But how did we leap from crude stone tools to astronomy and mathematics so suddenly? Somewhere in that gap, something changed. Humanity took an impossible step forward. Science calls it the dawn of civilization. The ancients called it the age of the gods. Perhaps it was not a dawn, but a return, a rekindling of something older, something remembered. Even our oldest myths speak not of beginnings, but of rebirths, golden ages that rose and fell before the first histories were written. In hidden caves and mountain tombs, traces of a language older than words remain. Hands pressed against stone, figures of men and beasts standing side by side, stars drawn with precision no primitive eye should know. They speak of a truth we no longer understand. Could it be that the first humans remembered something we have since forgotten? That the act of carving, of building, of counting the heavens was a kind of remembrance? Across continents and centuries, the same images appear again and again, serpents of light, winged beings, towering figures crowned with fire. History claims progress, that we have moved from ignorance to knowledge, from myth to science. But what if history is not a line, but a circle? What if we are not the first civilization to walk this earth, but only the latest? The Egyptians spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods walked among men and taught them the arts of life. The Mayans told of suns that came before, each destroyed by flood or fire. The Greeks warned of Atlantis, drowned for its pride. Even the scriptures hint at worlds destroyed before our own, and beings who descended from the heavens to shape humankind in their image. Are these merely stories, or fragments of a memory that predates history itself? Every civilization leaves a shadow, and those shadows are everywhere. Ruins beneath the Sahara, structures buried beneath the sea, stones arranged in ways that defy our strength and logic. They whisper of architects more ancient than man. Some say coincidence, others erosion. Yet the alignments match the heavens with impossible precision. Knowledge that should have taken millennia appears suddenly, as if given, not learned. Who gave it? Who were the teachers behind the veil of time? The ancients called them gods, angels, watchers. Perhaps they were symbols. Perhaps they were real. Every faith speaks of those who came from the sky bringing knowledge, fire, and order, then vanishing, leaving only monuments that point back to the stars. Maybe that is why temples across the world align with Orion, with Sirius, with the Pleiades, as if to remind us where to look when we forget. History is written by survivors, but more often by those who chose what should be remembered. Empires rise, knowledge is edited, truth is buried. What remains are fragments, the pieces we were allowed to keep. In those fragments lies a truth both terrifying and beautiful, that humanity's origins are far older and far stranger than we dare to believe. The earth glows softly below, turning slowly in the dark. It has seen civilizations rise and vanish. It remembers what we have forgotten. The stars above are not silent. They have watched our story unfold again and again. Perhaps there was a time when humans walked beside the gods, not in legend, but in light. Every beginning is only the echo of an older story. Before the first city rose from the dust, there was silence. A silence older than language, older than memory. It stretched across endless plains and forests, where firelight flickered in caves and the wind whispered through the bones of the earth. For hundreds of thousands of years, humanity drifted like shadows across the world. Hunters, gatherers, nomads who followed the seasons, leaving behind nothing but footprints and ashes. They lived with the rhythm of the earth, not above it. Then, without warning, everything changed. The world shifted from wilderness to civilization almost overnight. In the blink of an eye, in the briefest flash of geological time, humans who once painted on cave walls began raising monoliths, charting the stars and shaping stones heavier than the weight of imagination. No one can explain how it happened. It is called the Great Leap Forward, but no one knows what truly caused it. Evolution, we are told, is slow. It takes ages for a species to change. Tiny steps of adaptation spread across millions of years. Yet, in the record of our past, there is a moment where the curve spikes, where knowledge, art, and awareness appear as if switched on. Somewhere between survival and science, something or someone lit the spark. Archaeologists point to Göbekli Tepe, a hill of carved stones buried beneath the soil of modern-day Turkey. It was built over 11,000 years ago, 6,000 years before the pyramids. Massive stone circles carved with animals and celestial symbols, built by people who supposedly had no agriculture, no writing, no metal, no cities. According to textbooks, such complexity should not have existed then. And yet, it did. Each pillar at Göbekli Tepe weighs up to 20 tons. They were shaped and lifted without the wheel, without beasts of burden, without any of the tools civilization was thought to require. How did nomads move these stones? Why did they align them with the stars? And perhaps the greatest question of all, why did they later bury their creation in perfect preservation, as if protecting a message meant for a distant future? Sites like Göbekli Tepe are not alone. Across the world, in the oldest layers of soil, similar mysteries lie waiting. Submerged ruins off the coast of India, stone cities beneath the waves near Japan, traces of a civilization that predates history and yet shows knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and time. The pattern is everywhere, but the explanations never seem to fit. Mainstream science calls it coincidence, isolated progress in different regions. But myths tell another story. They speak of teachers who came from the sky, of gods who descended after a great darkness to guide the survivors of a lost world. Sumerian tablets call them those who descended from the heavens. In the Andes, they were the Viracochas, bearded beings of light who brought laws and learning. In Egypt, they were Thoth and Osiris, who taught men how to build, to write, to measure the stars. Different names, same story, always the same. Could it be that the leap from hunter to builder was not a natural evolution, but a restoration, a remembering of something forgotten? Perhaps knowledge does not only grow, perhaps it returns. When scientists examine the human brain, they find that its size and structure change dramatically in a relatively short span of time. Complex language, symbolic thought, mathematical abstraction, traits that appeared suddenly, as if the mind itself had been awakened. Was it mutation, chance, or influence? Some researchers quietly speculate about what they call genetic acceleration. a sudden evolutionary event caused not by environment but by deliberate design. If that sounds impossible, consider this. Even today, our DNA carries sequences we cannot fully explain, segments that seem inserted, not inherited, codes that hint at intervention beyond the boundaries of natural change. Ancient myths might have preserved that truth, encoded in the language of gods and creation, stories of clay and divine breath, of beings molded in another's image, of knowledge stolen from the heavens. Perhaps they were never meant as metaphor. As the Ice Age ended, oceans rose and the Earth reshaped itself. Entire regions vanished beneath the waves, taking with them the memories of what came before. Those who survived carried only fragments, legends, rituals, songs. They remembered a time of light, a time when they walked among their creators. And so, when they began to build again, they built not from invention, but from memory. Stone by stone, they tried to recall the pattern of the stars, the rhythm of the cosmos, the forgotten geometry of heaven and earth. It is possible that civilization did not begin in Sumer or Egypt but was reborn there, that the knowledge of the ancients was not discovered, but rediscovered, reborn from a silence before memory. When we look at the first temples, the first calendars, the first constellations carved in rock, we are not seeing beginnings. We are seeing echoes, echoes of a world that fell silent long before we learned to speak, echoes of builders who watched the skies and waited for a time when their story could be told again. History remembers the noise, the wars, the empires, the names of kings. But before all of that, there was only the stillness of the human mind awakening, a whisper of something vast, a reminder that civilization did not emerge by chance. It was called forth, and somewhere in that silence the first stones began to rise. The desert keeps its secrets well. Wind and time erase all traces of memory, but sometimes the earth exhales, and something long buried returns to light. It was 1946 in the Qumran Desert near the shores of the Dead Sea, a place so barren that even echoes seemed to fade before reaching the horizon. There, a group of young Bedouin shepherds were searching for a lost goat. One of them, a boy named Muhammad ed-Dib, threw a stone into a dark crevice in the rock, hoping to startle the animal. Instead of a bleat, he heard the sound of shattering clay. Curious, he crawled into the narrow cave. Inside were tall jars sealed with ancient lids. When he pried one open, he found not gold or treasure, but scrolls, brittle, dark, wrapped in linen. He could not have known it then, but he had uncovered one of the most important archaeological finds in human history. The jars contained fragments of nearly 1,000 manuscripts, texts written more than 2,000 years ago, hidden during a time of chaos and war. They would come to be known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among them were versions of biblical books, hymns, laws, and visions of heaven and hell. But buried among the familiar was something forbidden, a text long whispered about, erased from official history. A book once considered too dangerous for the world to read. The Book of Enoch. When scholars began to study the scrolls, confusion spread through the academic world. The Book of Enoch had been referenced by early Christian writers, even quoted in the New Testament, and yet it had vanished from every official Bible for centuries. No complete copy had ever been found, until that moment in the desert. Enoch's story was unlike anything else in Scripture. He was not a prophet or a warrior, but a witness. A man taken alive into the heavens, where he spoke with beings not of this world. He recorded their names, their purposes, and the secrets they revealed to him. He described how they descended to earth, how they taught humans the arts of metal and medicine, and how their knowledge brought both enlightenment and destruction. To those who read it, the Book of Enoch felt like a missing link, a bridge between myth and theology, between the divine and the alien. It spoke of the Watchers, celestial beings sent to observe humanity, who instead fell in love with what they saw. They defied their command and took mortal wives, giving birth to hybrid offspring, the Nephilim, giants who consumed the earth and whose violence provoked the Great Flood. For centuries, the Church had forbidden these writings. They did not fit the approved story of creation. They hinted at a past where gods walked among men, not as invisible spirits, but as flesh and blood. The councils that shaped early Christianity deemed it heresy, a dangerous echo of a truth too vast to contain. And so the book was buried, its words surviving only in fragments, in whispers, until the desert gave it back. The discovery shook historians, because what Enoch described sounded eerily familiar, not the product of faith, but of memory. He wrote of fire chariots that burned brighter than the sun, of stars that moved by will, of knowledge descending from the sky. For ancient readers, these were the miracles of angels. For modern minds, they resemble something else entirely. Even today, the origins of the Book of Enoch remain uncertain. Who wrote it? When was it first recorded? Its oldest layers date back long before the Bible itself, possibly to a time when myths were still lived rather than told. Many scholars believe it preserves fragments of an older cosmology, a memory of contact between early humans and something beyond comprehension. The text speaks of heavenly tablets and coded knowledge, records written in fire and light, sealed away until the appointed time. It describes a son of man who will judge the watchers long before such ideas appeared in mainstream theology. How could such advanced and detailed visions emerge from an era barely able to record its own history? Some historians dismiss it as imagination, a visionary poem inspired by dreams. But others wonder if the author, or those before him, knew something the world has since forgotten. Could Enoch's account be the preserved testimony of a real encounter? Could those watchers have been ancient visitors, misunderstood as angels by early humanity? The Dead Sea Scrolls raised these questions but offered no answers. Their discovery blurred the line between faith and archaeology. For every explanation, another mystery appeared. Who hid these writings in the desert caves? Why were they sealed so carefully? Were they protecting the words, or protecting the world from the words? In the years that followed, the scrolls traveled from desert caves to laboratories to museums to vaults. Some were quietly taken, lost, or destroyed. Others were kept from the public eye for decades. The story of their suppression became a mystery of its own. Yet fragments of Enoch's words survived, and they speak as clearly now as they did 2,000 years ago. They tell us that knowledge is not born, it is revealed, that humanity's story has been guided, altered, and perhaps rewritten many times before. They remind us that truth cannot be erased forever. It only waits, buried beneath the sands of time, waiting for a moment when the world is ready to listen again. In the desert wind, the caves of Qumran remain, silent but not empty. For within their walls, the past still breathes. And somewhere, between scripture and starlight, between myth and memory, the voice of Enoch still whispers, telling a story the world was never meant to forget. In the beginning, they were called the Watchers, beings of light, sent from the heavens to observe the world of men. They came not as conquerors, but as witnesses, custodians of a fragile species still learning to walk in the shadow of creation. For a time, they watched in silence. They studied humanity with the patience of eternity, tracing the growth of the first fires, the first songs, the first temples carved from stone. But silence is a heavy burden, and what begins as duty can turn to desire. According to the Book of Enoch, the Watchers were 200 in number. They descended upon Mount Hermon, a peak that even today bears the scars of forgotten worship. From that summit they swore an oath, binding themselves to one another, that none would turn back once the descent began. Their leader was called Semjaza, and his second Azazel. names that echo through countless myths under different tongues. Together, they cross the veil between heaven and earth, their radiance dimming to flesh. And as they took human form, they saw the daughters of men, and found them beautiful. They broke the ancient law. They mingled with mortals, taught them the arts of war and seduction, and sowed knowledge that would change the fate of the world. Azazel revealed the making of weapons. Penemu taught writing and wisdom. Barakal showed the movements of the stars. What they gave was power, and humanity, unprepared, learned to wield it. From their union came the Nephilim, giants of immense strength and insatiable hunger. They were not gods nor men, but something between. They ruled the early earth with might and terror, consuming the land and its people. Their shadows stretched across continents, their names remembered in whispers: Titans, Anakim, Rephaim, the fallen sons of heaven. The old stories agree, even when divided by oceans and ages. The Greeks spoke of gods who lay with mortals, and the monstrous heroes born from their union. The Hindus told of celestial beings, the Devas and Asuras, who walked among men and taught forbidden arts. In the myths of the Americas, the giants appear again, builders of megaliths, destroyed by a great flood. Different tongues, same memory. What if these myths are not imagination, but fragments of a single ancient truth, the record of a time when heaven touched the earth? If the Watchers were real, their story may be the oldest tragedy ever told, for in giving knowledge they disrupted balance. The gifts they offered, metallurgy, astronomy, magic, healing, were seeds of civilization, but they also sowed corruption. Humanity learned power before it learned wisdom. Violence spread. Empires rose on blood and stone, and the cries of the world reached the heavens. In the book of Enoch, the Most High hears the lament of the earth itself. The world, it says, was choking under the weight of the Nephilim. Mountains groaned. Rivers ran red, and so judgment was decreed. The archangels were sent, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel, to cleanse the earth and cast the Watchers into the abyss. Enoch records their punishment in haunting detail. Semjaza and his brethren were bound beneath the mountains, imprisoned in darkness until the end of days. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were destroyed in the flood that followed, but their spirits, it says, were not granted peace. They became the wandering entities of the air, restless, seeking bodies to inhabit, forever hungry for the life they lost. It is a story both divine and deeply human. It speaks of curiosity, rebellion, and love, and of the cost of knowledge. Perhaps it is a myth about temptation, or perhaps it preserves something literal, a memory of beings not of this earth who came down among us and changed our destiny forever. Across the world, ruins bear silent witness to that ancient contact. Mount Hermon, once sacred to the gods, the megaliths of Bashan, rumored resting places of giants. Even the flood myths, found in nearly every culture, hint at a deliberate erasure, a cleansing of something the world was not meant to keep. Science will tell us there were no Watchers, no angels, no celestial rebellion. Yet the stones, the texts, the patterns, they tell a quieter story, one that cannot be dismissed so easily, a story that whispers of beings who gave humanity its fire, then vanished into myth. Perhaps they were never gods at all, but travelers from a distant realm, Watchers in the truest sense, observing a species on the edge of awakening. And perhaps their greatest mistake was not in coming down, but in staying too long. The echoes of their presence remain, in the stories of fallen stars, in the strange monuments that align with the heavens, in the yearning we still feel to reach beyond our limits, to touch the unknown, to remember something our blood still knows but our minds have forgotten. The Watchers descended, and the world was never the same again. Their children became myths, their knowledge became legend, and their punishment became the silence between the stars. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind moves through the ruins of forgotten temples, it almost sounds like wings, a faint reminder of those who came before. The Watchers fell, the giants rose, and humanity was never alone again. The wind whispers through the jagged stones of the Giant's Causeway in the rugged coastlines of northern Ireland. Columns of basalt rise like the steps of some colossal throne, perfectly hexagonal, an otherworldly geometry carved not by human hands. Waves crash beneath them, relentless, indifferent, as if guarding secrets older than memory. One cannot help but feel dwarfed, not merely by the scale of the stones, but by the invisible weight of stories etched into the earth. Tales of giants who strode across continents, whose footsteps shaped the land itself. Mainstream archaeology tells us these formations are purely natural, born from volcanic activity millions of years ago. Lava cooled, contracted, fractured, hexagon by hexagon. A geological marvel, yes. But in the whispers of legend, something more lingers. The ancient Irish spoke of giants, the Fomorians, who once inhabited these lands. And across the Aegean, the Greeks sang of titans, immense beings who wrestled the heavens, shaping the world before the dawn of man. Could it be mere coincidence that distant cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, tell of enormous beings with uncanny similarity? Or is there a hidden thread, a memory, perhaps, of a time when giants walked among us? Consider the tales preserved in the book of Genesis, where the Nephilim are described as the offspring of divine beings and humans. Tall, powerful, feared. Legends from the Americas speak of ancient mound-building civilizations that attribute their creations to giants of unmatched strength. Even in the folklore of India, the Rakshasas loom as colossal figures, blending myth and morality. Across the globe, one truth emerges. The idea of giants is universal. Archaeology has occasionally unearthed skeletal remains that defy conventional explanation. Fossilized bones far larger than any human norm, some dismissed as anomalies or misinterpretations. Others, quietly documented, suggest a race once towering over the average human, a population erased from our collective history. Could myths of the past preserve memories of these beings? Perhaps the giants were not merely the product of imagination, but witnesses of a forgotten reality. Oddly, their stories are always tied to monumental constructions. Stone fortresses, megalithic temples, ancient walls of perfect cut and alignment. Theories abound that only a species of exceptional strength could have moved such colossal stones. Egypt's pyramids, the dolmens of Europe, the megalithic temples of Malta. Some suggest that our ancestors inherited techniques from those who came before, giants who vanished, leaving behind architecture too sophisticated for the humans who followed. It is tempting to dismiss these ideas. Modern science demands evidence, testable and repeatable. And yet, the landscape itself seems to resist full explanation. Why do so many ancient sites align with astronomical events, their stones set with geometric precision beyond the reckoning of simple Stone Age humans? Could a hybrid race, part human and part something more, have possessed the knowledge and strength to craft such wonders? The psychological imprint of giants persists. We are drawn to them, fascinated, terrified. They embody our awe of nature, our longing for strength, for scale. Yet the consistency across cultures hints at a shared origin, not merely imagination, but a collective memory. Could a global cataclysm, perhaps a flood or a climatic upheaval, have wiped out these beings? The survivors left only stories, legends encoded into myths, warnings passed through generations. And then there are the peculiar artifacts, small enough to be overlooked but intriguing nonetheless. Bronze tools larger than ordinary human hands could wield. Weapons too heavy for an average soldier. Ancient murals and sculptures depicting beings of immense stature. Odd facts emerge. In the Irish annals, accounts of giant skeletons unearthed in peat bogs. In the American Southwest, reports of enormous footprints in stone, occasionally misattributed to natural formations. Each fragment, a whisper from the past, daring us to question what we know. Some scholars suggest these myths were symbolic, meant to personify natural forces or human ambition. Titans for the struggle of humanity against chaos, giants for the embodiment of power. Yet the repetition across continents challenges that assumption. Symbol or memory? Perhaps both. Perhaps something was lost in translation, leaving us with legends instead of records. Centuries earlier, as ice sheets receded and the climate shifted, humans were adapting to a changing world. Sea levels rose, forests expanded, deserts formed. In this fragile epoch, stories may have been our first attempt to preserve knowledge. Giants could have been rulers, guardians, teachers, or perhaps adversaries, whose legacy was encoded in tales, their memory fused with morality, myth, and fear. But another possibility emerges. What if these giants were hybrids, engineered through some prehistoric experimentation, divine, alien, or otherwise? Could humanity itself be a successor race, inheriting not only our environment but also fragments of DNA from those ancient titans? Our myths might then be more than stories. They could be clues, cryptic, fragmented, yet persistent, waiting for those willing to see patterns across oceans and epochs. And so, the Giant's Causeway stands, not just as stone, but as a testament. The hexagonal columns are silent witnesses, perhaps reminders of beings who once strode with the power to shape the world. Imagine the sea long ago, waves smaller, winds softer, as giants walked across the earth, their shadows stretching over forests and mountains. It is a haunting vision, one that lingers when night falls and the coastline grows cold and empty. These stories persist because they touch something deep within us. The awe of scale, the fear of the unknown, the sense that we are not alone in our own history. Perhaps our understanding of humanity is incomplete, missing chapters buried beneath soil, stone, and legend. Perhaps giants are not extinct in memory. Perhaps they survive in tales, in echoes, in the places where imagination and reality meet. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across basalt steps, one can almost hear the faint, unearthly echoes of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, lost to time. And as the waves crash, as the wind whistles through the stones, a quiet question remains. Were these myths born from fear or from memory? And if memory, what else has humanity forgotten? If you enjoyed this journey into the shadow of giants, consider subscribing, so the whispers of the past continue to unfold, revealing secrets we are only beginning to understand. The sky darkened with a silence heavier than night. Clouds gathered like a gathering of judgment, a vast, suffocating canopy over the earth. Rain began not as a gentle whisper, but as a relentless roar, drumming against rooftops, forests, and mountains alike. Rivers swelled, valleys filled, and oceans rose, swallowing shores with indifferent fury. In the distant hills, ancient settlements, already shadows of a world long vanished, succumbed to the tide. Mainstream history recalls floods as natural disasters, local or regional events caused by heavy rains, melting glaciers, or shifts in river courses. But the echoes of ancient civilizations tell a story repeated across continents. From Mesopotamia's Gilgamesh to India's Manu, from the biblical Noah to the Aztec flood myths, the narrative is remarkably consistent. Humanity was nearly erased. One might wonder why so many cultures, separated by oceans and mountains, preserved memories of a deluge so vast it reshaped their world. Perhaps it was more than water. Perhaps the Great Purge was a reckoning, a response to a transgression older than recorded time. The Watchers, beings of divine descent yet drawn to mortal flesh, had overstepped their bounds. Forbidden unions, imparting knowledge and power to humans, birthed giants and heroes, and awakened ambitions that were never meant to flourish. The gods, witnessing the corruption, decreed a reset, a flood to cleanse the earth of flesh and spirit alike. Consider the scale of such an event. Geological records hint at sudden rises in sea levels at the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago. Massive floods reshaped coastlines, submerged land bridges, and may have erased entire civilizations. The memory of such trauma could have etched itself into human consciousness, emerging as myths and legends that carried both warning and history. Odd facts appear in the remnants left behind. In India, the Matsya Purana describes a golden fish guiding Manu to safety as waters rise. In Mesopotamia, the Atrahasis epic details a deity sending a great flood to destroy humanity, with only a chosen few surviving by divine favor. In the Americas, myths of a sky-born flood swept across landscapes, leaving survivors to rebuild a civilization from the remnants of a drowned world. Could these myths be independent recollections of the same cataclysm, or fragments of a truth lost to time? The symbolic consistency is striking. Floods represent cleansing, rebirth, judgment, and fear. Water erases footprints, washes away the past, and forces survivors to confront the fragility of life. It is both punishment and opportunity, a chance to start anew. And yet, the recurrence of these myths globally suggests more than metaphor. There may have been a cosmic event, or a series of regional disasters, collectively remembered as a divine wrath, a warning inscribed in story. But what of the giants and hybrid beings that preceded the flood? Could the Great Purge have been intended to remove them entirely? Some theorists suggest the rising waters were only the beginning. Fire, disease, or upheaval may have followed. Humanity itself might have been spared only because it was still pliable, still capable of rebuilding under divine supervision, its memories forever haunted by the enormity of the loss. Archaeological sites hint at sudden abandonment, layers of sediment that suggest rapid inundation, and in some cases, human remains showing signs of trauma inconsistent with simple drowning. Odd facts emerge in inscriptions. Warnings of hubris, of forbidden knowledge, of defiance against the divine. Could these messages have been directed toward the Watchers as much as humanity? Perhaps the flood was a lesson etched in survival, one that shaped morality, culture, and collective memory for millennia. Meanwhile, the landscape itself preserves the evidence. Submerged cities, river deltas rich with artifacts, and coastal terraces tell of a time when the land was dramatically altered. Stone inscriptions speak of kings and priests who vanished beneath rising waters, leaving only myths to hint at their existence. Even today, explorers and divers uncover ruins that seem impossibly ancient, suggesting a civilization predating recorded history, wiped clean by forces beyond human control. Speculation grows bolder. Some suggest celestial influence, a comet or meteor striking the ocean, triggering worldwide tsunamis. Others imagine tectonic upheavals, sudden climate shifts, and cascading disasters that could have simultaneously struck multiple regions. What if the gods themselves were allegories for forces of nature so powerful that humanity could scarcely comprehend them? The stories might encode observations of reality, clothed in divine metaphor to ensure they survived the ravages of time. And yet, amid destruction, there is the spark of hope. Survivors carried knowledge, tools, stories, and faith. Seeds of civilization were preserved, passed down in myths, rituals, and sacred texts. Humanity's resilience ensured that life continued, shaped in part by the memory of divine wrath, by the haunting tales of water that consumed the past. Perhaps that memory is why flood myths endure, why water holds such primal fear, and why tales of survival against impossible odds resonate so deeply across cultures. As the storm recedes, rivers calm, and the clouds part to reveal a battered but enduring world. One can imagine the first humans emerging from the waters, eyes wide with awe and terror, grasping the enormity of the forces that had reshaped their existence. They rebuilt, remembering the giants, the watchers, and the floods. They told stories, not merely of survival, but of warning, ensuring the past, though almost erased, would not be entirely forgotten. The wrath of the heavens, then, is not just myth. It is memory, encoded in narrative, art, and oral tradition. A story of caution, wonder, and rebirth. And perhaps it is also a reminder. Humanity's history may be far older, far stranger, and far more intertwined with forces beyond our understanding than we have ever been taught. As the final drops fall from darkened skies, one question remains. What else lies hidden beneath the waters, waiting to be remembered? And when the next storm gathers, will we recognize its echoes, or dismiss them as myth once more? Dust rises in the dim corridors of an ancient library, sunlight slanting through narrow windows, illuminating volumes long forgotten. The air carries the faint scent of parchment and decay, a quiet reminder that knowledge, no matter how profound, is fragile. Among these shadows lie texts that challenge everything we believe about humanity's past. Books erased, suppressed, or hidden from view. One such work, whispered across centuries, is the Book of Enoch. Mainstream history acknowledges it as an apocryphal text, a curiosity, interesting but not canonical. According to accepted narrative, it was excluded from the Bible because it was unreliable, its content inconsistent with the emerging theological framework. Yet, when one reads its words, the reason for erasure becomes more complex and unsettling. It speaks of the Watchers, angels who descended to earth, taught forbidden knowledge and mingled with humans. It tells of giants born from these unions and of a great purge sent by the heavens, the very narrative we explored in the previous chapter. Centuries earlier, early church councils convened to define orthodoxy, deciding which texts would shape faith and which would fade into obscurity. Political, social, and spiritual pressures intertwined. Certain teachings threatened the control of authority. The Book of Enoch, with its stories of celestial rebellion and divine secrets revealed to mortals, did not merely recount history. It offered knowledge. Knowledge that could inspire awe, fear, or defiance. Such revelations were dangerous. Odd facts emerge in the margins of history. Copies of Enoch were preserved in Ethiopia, hidden from the Western world for centuries. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, fragments of similar texts hint at a far larger tradition of forbidden knowledge. Lost Gospels, obscure prophecies, and mystic commentaries suggest that humanity once had access to stories deliberately excised from the narrative of power. Could it be that what we call lost books were never lost to truth, but hidden from control? The political motives become clearer when examining early church structures. Centralized authority required a uniform story, a lineage of faith, unbroken and unquestionable. Texts that suggested humans had once walked among giants, or that divine beings could bend natural law, threatened that narrative. Suppression was not merely doctrinal. It was a method of shaping civilization's memory, guiding morality, and determining which truths would survive. Meanwhile, scholars in distant lands preserved fragments of these truths. Jewish mystics, Gnostic sects, and early Christian heretics often faced persecution, yet they copied and safeguarded what mainstream authorities sought to erase. In their writings, giants stride across ancient landscapes, angels descend, and forbidden knowledge whispers of technologies, powers, and wisdom now obscured. Each surviving manuscript feels like a breadcrumb, leading to a history deliberately buried. Consider the implications. If the Book of Enoch had been fully integrated into canonical texts, our understanding of prehistory, morality, and divinity would be fundamentally altered. Knowledge of celestial watchers and their hybrid offspring could have reshaped theology, science, and even philosophy. Instead, the story was removed, leaving gaps filled with myth and mystery, questions silenced before they could awaken curiosity. Odd artifacts support these narratives. Ancient depictions of towering figures, strange symbols, and structures aligned to celestial events suggest a knowledge that was once widespread and carefully hidden. Could these artifacts be remnants of truths once freely shared in texts like Enoch? Or are they independent echoes of the same suppressed history? The parallels are uncanny. Across cultures, the theme of forbidden knowledge repeats. Gods, giants, celestial watchers, all pointing to a reality intentionally obscured. And yet, the very act of suppression ensures that curiosity persists. Hidden texts invite seekers, clandestine knowledge sparks speculation, and forbidden books become catalysts for discovery. Scholars, theologians, and adventurers alike have risked lives to recover fragments, often finding themselves piecing together a past too strange, too enormous to fit conventional timelines. Perhaps the greatest lesson lies in the silence itself. What is deliberately erased is often as telling as what is preserved. The absence of Enoch in mainstream scripture is a shadow, a reminder that history is written not only by what is remembered, but by what is chosen to be forgotten. And in the spaces left behind, in the gaps between texts and tombs, the echoes of giants, of watchers, and of forbidden knowledge persist. As one runs fingers across a crumbling manuscript, the mind begins to wander. What did humanity once know? What truths were deemed too dangerous for the general populace? And how much of our own history has been shaped not by what happened, but by what someone decided we should be allowed to remember? The forbidden books do more than tell stories. They challenge perception, questioning the official narrative and hinting at a world where humans, giants, and divine beings coexisted in ways our history books have quietly erased. They are the ghosts of knowledge, whispering across centuries, daring the curious to listen and to wonder. In the silence of these hidden archives, the past feels alive. It waits, patient, compelling, haunting. It reminds us that truth is fragile, often contested, and sometimes deliberately buried. The world of giants, angels, and forbidden knowledge is not merely myth. It is memory, carefully hidden, waiting to be rediscovered. And so, the pages of the Book of Enoch, scattered and partially destroyed, remain a window into a history deliberately silenced, a record of events that challenge the story we have been told. As candlelight flickers over fragile parchment, one realizes the buried truths may be closer than they appear, waiting for the brave to uncover what was never meant to survive. A fire blazed in the horizon, though no smoke rose from the forests. Flames danced along the sky, illuminating a lone figure walking upward, beyond mortal reach. His name, whispered across millennia, is Enoch, a man said to have walked with the divine, and then mysteriously vanished. Not in death, not in decay, but in a luminous ascent, carried beyond the earthly plane. Mainstream texts describe Enoch as a patriarch, a righteous man, noted for his devotion and piety. Genesis tells us simply, Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, for God took him. A brief sentence, almost an afterthought. Yet within that simplicity lies an enigma that has haunted scholars, mystics, and storytellers alike. Who was this man? What knowledge did he carry that warranted such a departure from the mortal world? Oddly, Enoch appears in other traditions under different names. In Egypt, he is mirrored in Thoth, the scribe of the gods, keeper of time, and teacher of celestial wisdom. In Greece, Hermes Trismegistus emerges, a figure intertwined with secret knowledge, alchemy, and the rhythms of the cosmos. Could these be different names for the same individual? A human conduit for divine understanding, whose influence spread across civilizations. The parallels are striking: wisdom of the heavens, mastery of calendars, understanding of cosmic laws. Consider the practical implications of such knowledge. Enoch is credited with building the first calendar, a tool to harmonize humanity with the cycles of the stars, the moon, and the sun. Time itself, measured and ordered, was a gift of comprehension, transforming society from chaos into structure. Ancient Egyptians, Sumerians, and Hebrews all prized celestial observation. Could Enoch, or his archetype, have been the source, the hidden hand guiding early humanity toward order and understanding? Meanwhile, myths tell of his interactions with the Watchers, the celestial beings who once walked the earth. Enoch was their judge, their mediator, the recorder of transgressions. He bore witness to forbidden knowledge, yet remained incorruptible, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. Odd facts hint at these interactions: cryptic, astronomical tables, coded messages in ancient texts, and recurring motifs of a man who ascends, who speaks with beings beyond comprehension. All suggest that the stories of Enoch were not merely moral tales, but repositories of cosmic insight. Some researchers suggest his ascent symbolizes something more than a spiritual journey. Fire and light often indicate transformation, initiation into higher knowledge. Could Enoch have undergone a ritual, a process, or even an event that allowed him to transcend human limitations? And if so, what did he carry back or leave behind for humanity to remember? Across cultures, initiates who touch the divine emerge with wisdom, and Enoch is perhaps the earliest example of this archetype. Oddly, traces of his influence appear in architecture and astronomy. Temples, pyramids, and observatories often align with celestial events with uncanny precision. Was this knowledge inherited from a single source? A teacher who walked among humans and then vanished? Or are these alignments the echoes of a collective memory, remembering the lessons of one extraordinary man whose life bridged heaven and earth? Meanwhile, in literature, Enoch is portrayed as a cosmic historian, chronicling the secrets of the universe. The heavenly tablets he observed recorded cycles of time, the movements of stars, and the rise and fall of civilizations. He is both observer and participant, chronicler and judge. Oddly, this narrative parallels other mythic figures: the Sumerian Enki, the Egyptian Thoth, the Greek Hermes. Each serves as a vessel for divine wisdom, a teacher whose life blurs the line between legend and history. The mystery deepens when considering his disappearance. Unlike other patriarchs or sages, Enoch did not die in the conventional sense. Some texts suggest he was taken into the heavens, body and soul, leaving behind only his teachings. Could this have been a literal event? Or a metaphor, encoded in story, representing the transfer of forbidden knowledge from mortal hands to divine custody? Whatever the interpretation, the narrative persists, compelling us to look deeper into the origins of human understanding. And yet, the story of Enoch is not just one of ascent, it is a story of responsibility. He witnessed the consequences of knowledge misused, of celestial beings violating boundaries, and of humanity struggling to comprehend forces beyond its capacity. His role was not passive. He mediated, guided, and preserved wisdom, ensuring that even amidst chaos, a record of cosmic order survived. Perhaps this is why his story resonates so strongly across civilizations. It is both warning and guide, a reminder of what is possible when knowledge is revered rather than feared. As night falls, imagine Enoch standing on the threshold of heaven and earth, observing the patterns of stars, recording the cycles of life and death, understanding the balance of all things. His gaze reaches across deserts, rivers, and mountains, imprinting knowledge into the cultures that would follow. And though the man himself is gone, the archetype endures. In Thoth, in Hermes, in every culture that reveres the stars, time, and the pursuit of wisdom. Perhaps then, Enoch was never merely a man. Perhaps he was a bridge, a symbol, a teacher, and a living memory of a time when humanity glimpsed the divine. The question lingers: If one man could carry such knowledge, how much has been lost, hidden, or forgotten in the centuries since? And how much of our history still waits to be illuminated by the light of understanding, shining through the fire of Enoch's ascent? Imagine a river valley bathed in morning light, reeds swaying gently along its banks, while the Tigris and Euphrates glint like silver threads weaving through fertile land. Suddenly, in this cradle of civilization, entire cities rise seemingly from nothing. Mud brick walls, bustling markets, ziggurats reaching for the sky. Writing appears, cuneiform etched in clay, mathematics, astronomy, law codes, and complex irrigation systems. Archaeology calls it progress, civilization advancing. But the tablets themselves tell a story that challenges this tidy narrative. The Sumerians claimed their knowledge was not entirely of human origin. The gods, or the Anunnaki, as they are known in their records, descended from the heavens, bringing wisdom, technology, and structure. They taught humans how to farm, to build, to measure the stars, to calculate time. To the modern mind, it is myth, allegory, a way to personify natural forces. Yet the detail, the precision, the consistency across texts suggest something more. Odd facts stand out. Their astronomical tables charted planets with astonishing accuracy. They calculated lunar cycles, predicted eclipses, and tracked celestial patterns centuries in advance. Their mathematics allowed for complex architecture and city planning. Their cities, like Uruk and Eridu, exhibit organization far beyond what one would expect from a sudden urban emergence. Could humans have discovered all this independently, or were they recipients of knowledge beyond their natural development? Meanwhile, the tablets themselves speak in unmistakable terms, knowledge given by those who came from the heavens. They describe beings of immense power who walked among humans, shared secrets, and then returned to the sky. The motifs echo stories from other civilizations, the Watchers, the Titans, the Giants. Could the Sumerians have preserved in clay and ink a record of the same beings whose deeds are whispered in myths around the globe? Consider the implications. If a civilization suddenly received knowledge from external sources, its rise could appear almost instantaneous. Writing, mathematics, law, astronomy all appear fully formed with no evident precursors. Archaeologists call this cultural leap, but the Sumerians' own testimony suggests a gift, not evolution. Oddly, these gifts often center around tools for civilization: agriculture, measurement, record-keeping, knowledge not for power alone, but for the management of society, perhaps even survival itself. Yet there is another layer. The Anunnaki were not benevolent in all accounts. They demanded obedience, rituals, and labor. Some texts hint at mining operations, work in gold-rich regions, and strict hierarchies. Could this have been a mutually beneficial arrangement? Or a subtle form of control, teaching humans knowledge while ensuring their subservience? The line between instruction and dominance blurs, leaving questions that modern scholars struggle to answer. Odd facts also appear in iconography. Statues and cylinder seals depict beings taller and more elaborate than ordinary humans, wearing intricate garments, holding mysterious objects. These images could represent rulers or gods, but some suggest literal beings, the same entities described in the texts. Across Sumerian cities, depictions of skyborne figures and hybrid humans appear repeatedly, reinforcing the notion that the people themselves believed in visitors from beyond. And yet, the story does not end there. The Sumerians documented the cycles of civilization, recounting periods of rise and fall, floods and upheaval, knowledge gained and lost. Their annals recall times when the heavens intervened directly, shaping the destinies of kings, guiding the growth of cities, or punishing hubris. Oddly, this mirrors myths from other cultures. The Egyptian gods' involvement in human affairs, the flood stories of the Hebrews, the descent of celestial watchers, a pattern emerges. Humanity's first civilizations may have been guided, shaped, or instructed by beings whose origins lie beyond the stars. Some speculate that the Sumerians' rapid advancement is a key piece of a much larger puzzle. They were the first recorded civilization, yet they appeared with fully formed technology and culture. Could the Anunnaki, or some other ancient advanced race, have sown the seeds of civilization intentionally across multiple regions, creating templates that humans would inherit? If so, what does this say about the origins of knowledge, culture, and authority itself? Meanwhile, modern excavations continue to uncover oddities. Tablets with star charts, unusual metallurgy, and depictions of celestial machinery hint at a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos. Artifacts that appear inexplicable within the context of human development suggest a lost transmission of knowledge. Perhaps the Sumerians were not the originators, but the recipients, and their story is the first recorded whisper of a reality deliberately hidden from the rest of human history. The Sumerian puzzle remains unresolved. Their cities, texts, and artifacts offer tantalizing evidence of guidance from beyond, yet the mainstream insists on natural evolution, on cultural leaps explained through time, adaptation, and human ingenuity. Yet when one reads the tablets, observes the architecture, and compares myths across continents, it becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss the possibility of intervention. Knowledge appears almost too advanced, too structured, too precise, as if handed down by a careful, deliberate teacher. As the sun sets over the ruins of Ur, casting long shadows across ziggurats and marketplaces frozen in clay, one cannot help but imagine those first humans looking up at beings descending from the sky, recording their words, teaching them to build, to calculate, to order the world. The Sumerians' story is not just of civilization. It is of instruction, inheritance, and perhaps the subtle shaping of humanity itself. And so the puzzle persists. Who truly gave the Sumerians their knowledge? And if it was not of this earth, how far back does that chain of guidance extend? Across myths, across floods, across forbidden texts and forgotten giants, one thread runs unbroken. Humans, once children of the divine, learning to walk in a world that had already been shaped by those who came before. Above the plains of ancient Sumer, the sky burns with a light unlike the sun's familiar glow. Travelers descend, shimmering and colossal, walking among humans who stare upward in awe and fear. They are the Anunnaki, a name that echoes through clay tablets, myths, and whispers of the ancients. Were they gods, angels, or visitors from a world beyond our comprehension? The truth is shrouded in mystery, but their influence is undeniable. Mainstream historians describe the Anunnaki as mythological deities, a pantheon created to explain natural phenomena and social hierarchy. Yet the tablets tell a different story. They speak of beings who came from the heavens, who ruled and taught, who demanded labor and tribute, and who possessed technology beyond the imagination of early humans. The line between myth and history begins to blur. Oddly, their origins are tied to a distant planet, Nibiru. Some texts describe it as a homeworld, a celestial body with a long elliptical orbit, returning periodically to the inner solar system. Its visitors sought something vital: gold. Why gold? Some suggest it was a resource needed to sustain their atmosphere. Others speculate it was a symbol, a conduit of energy, or even a tool for genetic experiments. Whatever the purpose, the Anunnaki were systematic in their endeavors, precise in their instruction, and demanding of obedience. Meanwhile, the tablets describe genetic experiments with early humans. Humankind, in this context, was not a fully independent species, but a project, a hybridization engineered to serve, to labor, to inherit knowledge, and perhaps to carry forward a legacy. Could the giants of legend, the hybrid offspring of watchers and mortals, be connected to these early experiments? The parallels are uncanny. beings taller, stronger, imbued with knowledge yet ultimately removed from the world in catastrophic purges. Odd facts appear in the archaeological record. Artifacts depict elongated beings, intricate tools, and depictions of celestial machinery. There are tablets illustrating beings descending from the sky, instructing humans in agriculture, metallurgy, and architecture. In some cases, the language is precise, almost technical, suggesting advanced understanding rather than simple allegory. Could these records be literal rather than symbolic? The Anunnaki's story extends beyond Sumer. References appear across continents: Egypt, Mesoamerica, and even in Indo-European myths. Recurring themes emerge: celestial visitors, advanced knowledge, divine punishment, and careful guidance. Could the Anunnaki have traveled widely, leaving fragments of their wisdom embedded in local cultures? Oddly, the similarities are too specific to dismiss as coincidence. Myths converge where history is silent. Speculation grows bolder when considering their motives. Mining gold, teaching humans, enforcing labor, all point to practical objectives. But there is another, more enigmatic layer. Were the Anunnaki also guardians of knowledge, ensuring certain truths survived? Were their experiments intended to seed human intelligence, to cultivate a civilization capable of comprehending the cosmos? Or were they purely utilitarian, indifferent to morality, shaping humanity for reasons now lost to time? Oddly, the texts speak of hierarchies even among the Anunnaki. Some benevolent, some harsh, some guiding human progress, others enforcing punishment. This complexity suggests they were neither purely divine nor wholly alien. Perhaps they straddled both, creators and overseers, teachers and tyrants, caught between cosmic duty and practical necessity. Meanwhile, their legacy persists in architecture, astronomy, and ritual. Ziggurats, aligned with the stars, may have been more than monuments. They could be markers, observatories, or symbols of communication with celestial visitors. Ancient calendars, astoundingly precise, echo knowledge attributed to these beings. Even myths of flood, giants, and forbidden wisdom may be reflections of the Anunnaki's interventions, encoded in narrative to survive human memory. Some suggest the Anunnaki were the architects of human civilization's blueprint. Technology, law, and social structure all gifts from beyond. Yet paradoxically, their interventions often included conflict, punishment, and control. Floods, exile, and purges appear repeatedly, hinting at a moral dimension. The story of humanity, then, is inseparable from theirs. A complex dance between creation, instruction, and oversight. Odd artifacts continue to surface: tablets with star maps, sculptures of hybrid beings, and objects that defy conventional dating. Each discovery raises more questions than answers. Did the Anunnaki truly exist, or are we seeing layers of myth entwined with memory? Are these accounts allegorical or records of forbidden history that mainstream narratives have long dismissed? The enigma endures because it challenges everything we assume about humanity's origins. Were we entirely the product of evolution, or were we shaped, guided, and genetically influenced by beings from beyond the Earth? Were the myths of giants, watchers, and celestial visitors attempts to preserve forbidden truths, disguised in allegory to survive millennia? The answers remain elusive, but the questions alone reshape the way we see our history. As the sun sets over ancient ruins and clay tablets, one can almost hear the whispers of the Anunnaki, their footsteps across deserts, their voices in the wind, their influence etched in stone and memory. They may be gone, their planet distant or vanished, yet their legacy endures in the very structure of human civilization, challenging us to consider how much of our past was truly our own. The Anunnaki are an enigma, a bridge between myth and history, between the earthly and the celestial. And as we uncover more fragments, one cannot help but ask, if their story is true, what else has been hidden, waiting for the light of discovery to reveal it. In the dim glow of an ancient ziggurat, hands move carefully over clay tablets, tracing lines that have survived millennia. The Sumerians called him Adamu, the first worker, the one who labored under the instruction of the Anunnaki. He was not merely human, nor entirely divine. He was the product of intention, a hybrid designed to serve, to think, to inherit the legacy of beings from the heavens. Mainstream archaeology regards such accounts as myth, allegorical stories explaining labor, hierarchy, and survival. Yet the texts are remarkably specific. Adamu was molded, instructed, and awakened. Crafted with purpose, he was endowed with intelligence and physical capability sufficient to extract resources, cultivate land, and build structures. Oddly, the narrative aligns with themes found in other ancient cultures. Humans created or guided by higher powers, often in ways that defy natural explanation. Consider the chilling possibility. Modern genetics reveals that humanity is not as uniform as once believed. DNA markers hint at sudden diversity, unexpected genetic combinations, and traces of traits that emerge abruptly in evolutionary timelines. Could these patterns be remnants of intentional design rather than random mutation? Ancient texts suggest the Anunnaki, or their archetypal equivalents, intervened directly, experimenting with early humans to create a workforce capable of managing the Earth's resources. Meanwhile, myths echo across the globe. In Egypt, the figure of Thoth shapes man from clay, breathing life into creation. In Genesis, Adam is formed from dust, imbued with divine spark. Oddly, these stories mirror the Sumerian narrative almost precisely. Across continents and millennia, humanity is depicted as crafted, guided, or hybridized. Could the tale of Adamu be the earliest recorded version of the same underlying truth? The texts describe the process with astonishing detail. Adamu's intelligence was enhanced, his physicality calibrated, skills taught for mining, construction, agriculture. He was the prototype of humanity, engineered to inherit a world already under the supervision of celestial architects. Odd facts appear. Some tablets even describe different models of humans, adjusted for strength, endurance, or cognitive ability. Could this be early experimentation in selective enhancement, a precursor to what modern science might call genetic engineering? Meanwhile, the narrative carries a moral undertone. The Anunnaki were not benevolent creators. They demanded obedience, and the hybrid's survival depended on servitude. There are hints of rebellion, of hybrid offspring growing beyond their intended roles, foreshadowing the rise of giants and the purges that followed. The story is not merely creation, it is control, experimentation, and the management of life itself. Oddly, the archaeological record offers fragments that tantalize. Skeletons of unusual size, artifacts too sophisticated for the earliest known humans, and cultural leaps in technology suggest sudden advances. Could these be evidence of a species engineered for purpose rather than evolved entirely through natural selection? The parallels between myth and discovery challenge the boundaries of conventional history. Meanwhile, the implications ripple forward. If humanity was indeed shaped, guided, or engineered by a celestial intelligence, what does this mean for our understanding of evolution, free will, and destiny? Are we inheritors of Earth alone, or products of deliberate experimentation spanning star systems? The narrative of Adamu suggests that the origins of civilization, labor, and human cognition are intimately entwined with forces beyond our comprehension. Odd facts appear in ritual and symbolism. Temples depict hybrid figures alongside gods. Murals illustrate celestial visitors bestowing gifts and knowledge. Even the arrangement of cities and ziggurats mirrors cosmological patterns, as if the architects of flesh left encoded instructions for future generations. Perhaps these were warnings, lessons, or memorials, recording the creation of humans as a project rather than a natural evolution. The story of Adamu is haunting in its intimacy. It portrays humans not as the final product of chance, but as deliberate constructs, crafted with intention and embedded within a larger celestial framework. It raises questions about autonomy, identity, and the shadow of our creators. Oddly, the narrative never fully condemns or glorifies the Anunnaki. It presents their actions as practical, even inevitable, a reflection of cosmic order and intervention. As one traces the lines of these ancient tablets, the realization emerges. Humanity may have begun not in a garden, nor from purely natural processes, but in workshops of gods or travelers from the stars. Flesh and intelligence designed, guided, and unleashed upon a planet already waiting for stewardship. The question lingers, quiet and unsettling. If we are a project and not a product of evolution alone, how much of ourselves remains independent? And how much is inherited from architects who walked the earth long before recorded history began? Adamu's legacy is everywhere, in labor, in technology, in our own genetic makeup. It is subtle, yet pervasive. Perhaps the story is not merely myth, but a warning, a memory encoded across civilizations. It reminds us that the origins of humanity are not simple, and that the line between creation and experiment is thinner than we dare to imagine. In the fading light of Sumerian ruins, one can almost see the first worker rise, guided by hands not wholly human, taught to endure, to toil, to build a world for beings who had come from the stars. The architects of flesh left their mark on Earth and on humanity itself, an indelible trace of intention woven into the very fabric of life. The first raindrops fell softly at first, a gentle whisper on the parched earth. Then the skies darkened, clouds thickened, and the heavens opened with a ferocity that seemed almost intentional. Rivers swelled, mountains wept, and valleys disappeared beneath a rising tide. Humanity, young and unprepared, watched in awe and terror as the world they knew dissolved into water. This is the story that echoes across every ancient culture, the Great Deluge. Mainstream interpretations treat these flood myths as symbolic, morality tales warning against hubris, excess, or impiety. But the consistency across time and geography is striking. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of Utnapishtim, who built a massive vessel to survive a world-ending flood. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah constructs an ark to preserve life. In India, Manu is guided by divine fish to safety. Across continents, from the Americas to Polynesia, flood stories repeat, suggesting a shared memory of cataclysm. Archaeology offers intriguing clues. Sedimentary layers in ancient river deltas indicate rapid inundation. Coastal settlements, once thriving, now lie submerged beneath water or silt. Geological evidence hints at sudden sea level rises at the end of the last ice age, approximately 12,000 years ago, reshaping coastlines and erasing human footprints. Could these disasters be the historical events behind the myths, recorded in story and memory as divine wrath? Oddly, the texts and tablets often describe the cause not merely as natural, but as a deliberate judgment. The gods, observing the corruption of humanity and the excesses of hybrid offspring, unleash the flood as a cleansing force. In Sumerian accounts, the Anunnaki watch as the waters rise, selecting a few humans to survive while the rest are swept away. This aligns with later accounts in Gilgamesh and Genesis, suggesting that the deluge was not just an act of nature, but a planned event of cosmic consequence. Meanwhile, the flood leaves behind enduring traces. Archaeologists uncover layers of destruction, animal remains, and sudden changes in human settlement patterns. Entire civilizations vanish from the record, leaving only myths, oral traditions, and scattered artifacts. Oddly, some survivors are said to carry knowledge forward, preserving fragments of lost civilizations and stories, calendars, and architectural principles. Perhaps the flood was not total erasure, but a reset, a way to safeguard knowledge while removing the corruption of earlier generations. Speculation deepens when considering the role of the Anunnaki and hybrid beings. Could the flood have been aimed at those created through genetic experimentation? Some texts suggest giants and hybrids were wiped from the earth, leaving only humans to inherit the planet. Could this have been the purpose behind sudden catastrophic floods evidenced by geology and sedimentation? The alignment of myth, science, and archaeology hints at events far more dramatic than simple climate fluctuations. Odd facts emerge in cross-cultural comparison. In Mesoamerica, stories of deluges parallel those of the Near East. In Australia, Aboriginal myths recount waters rising to cover the land. In ancient China, the Great Yu legend tells of massive floods and engineering feats to control them. The repetition is uncanny, as if humanity collectively remembered a catastrophe that spanned the globe, its details encoded in narrative to survive generations. Meanwhile, scientific hypotheses offer mechanisms. Meltwater from retreating glaciers, tsunamis caused by asteroid impacts, or tectonic upheavals could account for sudden and dramatic flooding. Yet the sheer scale described in myth, covering entire regions, wiping out populations, and altering the climate, suggests something more than gradual environmental change. Could human memory have retained the trauma of a truly global flood, its details mythologized over millennia? The deluge leaves philosophical echoes. It represents destruction and renewal, judgment and mercy. The survivors, chosen by fate or divine will, inherit a world cleansed and restructured. Oddly, the flood also preserves memory. Stories, rituals, and cultural knowledge endure, guiding humanity in agriculture, astronomy, and law. It is a paradox, catastrophe as both erasure and preservation. As the waters receded, the survivors stepped onto a transformed earth. Mountains, rivers, and forests remained, but coastlines shifted, fertile valleys disappeared, and the memory of giants and hybrid beings faded. Humanity began again, guided by the lessons encoded in myth and the fragments of knowledge that endured. The Great Deluge was not merely a flood, it was a pivot point, a moment that reshaped the trajectory of civilization. In the silence after the storm, one can almost hear the echo of the waters, the whisper of the gods, and the cries of the lost. Across time, humanity remembered. The flood became story, allegory, and warning. And even today, in every coastal ruin, sediment layer, and fragment of text, traces of the Great Deluge endure, challenging us to look beyond the surface of history, to question what was destroyed, what survived, and what remains hidden beneath the waves. The forests of ancient lands were darker then, shadows deeper, and every footstep echoed against enormous trees. Some say that in these shadows, beings walked whose height rivaled the canopy itself. Giants. Stories of them have survived in myths, scriptures, and the travelogues of explorers who swore they had seen them with their own eyes. From the biblical Anakim and Rephaim to distant tribal legends, these accounts speak of humans of impossible size and strength, remnants perhaps of the Nephilim, the offspring of celestial visitors and mortal women. Mainstream historians often dismiss such tales as exaggeration, folklore, or metaphor for power and fear. Yet the frequency of these stories, their global distribution, and the detail with which they describe anatomy, culture, and behavior demand consideration. Oddly, giants are rarely alone in these narratives. They appear alongside structures too massive for ordinary humans to construct, tools too large to wield, and landscapes altered in ways that hint at extraordinary force. Consider the words of Marco Polo, writing of mountains in Asia where tribes of enormous men and women dwelled, whose strength was legendary. Magellan, sailing the Pacific, recorded encounters with people taller than any he had ever seen, whose proportions defied belief. Oddly, similar accounts appear in Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific Islands, often independent of one another. Could these be echoes of the same ancient lineage, surviving the purges, floods, and centuries of human forgetfulness? Meanwhile, biblical texts preserve the memory of the Anakim, Rephaim, and other clans of giants. Moses' encounters, the conquest narratives, and references to cities and fortresses hint at beings who were not merely taller, but stronger, cunning, and formidable in every way. Some scholars suggest metaphorical readings, symbols of insurmountable enemies, but the consistency of these descriptions across time and geography raises questions. Were these figures mythic or historical survivors of an earlier, hybridized race? Odd artifacts hint at more than stories. Megalithic structures, massive stone tools, and elongated skeletal remains have been discovered in scattered locations. While many are contested, some exhibit proportions inconsistent with ordinary human anatomy. Could these remnants point to a species that once walked alongside us, shaping the land, influencing human development, and leaving traces in legend? The possibility challenges conventional timelines and anthropological assumptions. Meanwhile, legends also describe the behavior and culture of giants. They hunted, built, and organized societies. Some texts suggest they possessed knowledge inherited from the Watchers, understanding the stars, the cycles of nature, and technologies lost to modern memory. Oddly, the survival of their lore within human myth indicates that humans themselves observed and remembered them, recording what they saw in stories, songs, and oral history. Speculation deepens when considering the flood and the Anunnaki experiments. If humanity was engineered and hybrid giants existed prior to the deluge, could these survivors have persisted in remote regions, isolated from ordinary humans? The myths may preserve a memory of coexistence, not just conquest. Perhaps the giants were witnesses, inheritors, or even guardians of knowledge too dangerous for the wider population, maintaining fragments of pre-flood wisdom in their lineages. Oddly, skeletal remains described as unusually large have been found around the globe, though mainstream science often attributes them to misinterpretation or exaggeration. Yet the repetition of detail, the dimensions, the robustness, the extraordinary musculature cannot be easily ignored. Could these be the literal remnants of beings described in scripture and myth, or evidence of something stranger entirely? Meanwhile, explorers and historians consistently remark on the fear and awe that giants inspired. They were not simply larger humans. They embodied power, authority, and sometimes terror. The biblical and historical records frequently portray their downfall as a turning point, a cleansing of the world to restore balance. Oddly, even after their disappearance, the memory of giants influenced human culture. Rituals, myths, and architectural ambition all echo their presence. As one walks through the ruins of ancient cities, across megalithic stones and overgrown paths, it is possible to imagine giants moving through the world, shaping it, building monuments, and leaving traces in ways that ordinary humans could not. Their story, whispered through time, challenges the boundaries of myth and history. Perhaps they were not merely stories or allegories, but real beings who walked the earth, survived the Great Deluge, and left their mark in ways subtle, terrifying, and enduring. The memory of giants persists because they were extraordinary. In every myth, every traveler's tale, every scripture, they remind us that the world we think we know may be far smaller than the one that existed before. And as the shadows lengthen across ancient forests and mountains, one cannot help but wonder, what remains hidden in the corners of the earth, waiting for us to remember that giants once walked among us? The morning sun casts long shadows over massive blocks of stone, each one dwarfing the figures who labor nearby. At Baalbek, in modern-day Lebanon, enormous monoliths lie in perfect alignment, their surfaces smooth, their edges precise. Nearby, in the frozen expanses of Siberia, megaliths rise from the tundra, perfectly shaped and arranged as if by intent. The sheer size and weight of these stones defy explanation. How could ordinary humans, using only simple tools, move and arrange them with such accuracy? Mainstream archaeology attributes these feats to ingenuity, time, and brute force. Ramps, rollers, and levers, they argue, allowed ancient builders to achieve what seems impossible today. Yet, odd facts persist. Some blocks weigh hundreds of tons, far beyond the capacity of conventional methods. Some align astronomically, marking solstices, equinoxes, or star cycles. And in certain sites, unfinished stones hint at techniques now lost, tools or methods erased from memory. Meanwhile, myth intertwines with stone. Many cultures attribute these structures to giants, demigods, or divine beings. Legends speak of enormous hands shaping rock, of celestial visitors guiding construction, or of humans augmented with extraordinary strength. Could there be truth behind the stories? Could remnants of the Nephilim or the hybrid descendants of the Watchers have lifted and placed these stones with ease? The scale of the monuments seems to invite this possibility. Oddly, the precision of construction is remarkable. Stones fit together with gaps smaller than a hair, forming walls that have endured earthquakes, erosion, and millennia. Some blocks weigh more than 1,000 tons, yet they rest in perfect harmony, seemingly without mortar. Even modern technology struggles to replicate such feats. Could forgotten technology, perhaps passed down from celestial visitors or ancient civilizations, explain these constructions? Or is the key hidden in lost knowledge, encoded in mythology and ritual? Meanwhile, travel across continents reveals similar patterns. In South America, the stones of Pumapunku puzzle engineers. In Malta, the massive temples defy lifting methods known to their builders. In Egypt, the pyramids' casing stones are polished and aligned with astonishing precision. The same questions echo: who built them and how? Oddly, these locations often overlap with legends of giants, gods, or otherworldly beings. The correlation is too consistent to ignore. Some speculate that megalithic structures served purposes beyond mere construction. Could they have been observatories, energy conductors, or even markers of ancient knowledge? The alignment of stones with celestial bodies suggests a comprehension of astronomy and mathematics far ahead of their recorded time. Perhaps the builders were not ordinary humans, but beings with insight into the cosmos, or humans guided by those who once walked among the stars. Odd facts emerge in the methods described in texts and oral tradition. Ropes of extraordinary tensile strength, lever systems amplified by multiple people, and ceremonial rituals hint at techniques that combined engineering with knowledge now lost. Could this blend of technology and ritual indicate that construction was more than mechanical? It was sacred, precise, and possibly augmented by forces we no longer understand? Meanwhile, the sheer awe inspired by these stones cannot be overlooked. Monoliths tower over observers, provoking the same reaction as the myths themselves: reverence, fear, and the sense that human hands alone could not have accomplished this. Perhaps this was intentional, a statement by their builders, whether giant, god, or technologically advanced civilization, to leave a permanent mark on the earth. The question remains: were these stones moved by strength, knowledge, or something stranger? Some suggest alien intervention. Others point to lost technologies of prehistoric civilizations. Oddly, the monuments themselves seem to resist final conclusions, their mystery embedded in granite, limestone, and basalt. They invite speculation, reflection, and wonder. As the sun sets, casting a golden glow across Baalbek, one can almost see the outlines of giants at work, or perhaps humans guided by unseen forces, lifting, aligning, and shaping stones too massive to imagine. The monuments endure as silent testimony to feats of strength, skill, and possibly knowledge that humans no longer possess. They are bridges between myth and reality, a reminder that the past holds secrets far heavier and far older than we dare to lift in our minds. Beneath the earth, in tombs long sealed and in forgotten corners of museums, evidence of humanity's past sometimes whispers before disappearing. Reports of giant skeletons unearthed in North and South America, from mounds in Ohio to caves in Patagonia, have been recorded, then lost, suppressed, or quietly removed from archives. Stones, inscriptions, and burial sites vanish under mysterious circumstances, leaving only faint traces for researchers daring enough to investigate. Mainstream archaeology often dismisses these anomalies as misidentifications, hoaxes, or exaggeration. Yet odd facts persist. Witnesses, miners, farmers, and explorers have documented skeletons far larger than ordinary humans, with robust bones, elongated skulls, and unusual features inconsistent with known species. Some bones allegedly stored in universities or government collections have been labeled confidential or quietly lost, fueling speculation about intentional concealment. Meanwhile, forbidden tombs reveal a similar pattern. In remote regions, pyramids, ziggurats, and megalithic burial chambers are discovered only to be closed off by authorities citing safety or political concerns. Inside, the walls bear carvings of enormous beings, artifacts of advanced metallurgy, or strange celestial symbols. Oddly, when these sites are studied, access dwindles, excavation halts, and records vanish. Could this be mere coincidence, or evidence of a historical narrative carefully curated to hide uncomfortable truths? Speculation grows when examining sealed reports from early archaeological expeditions. Photographs, field notes, and eyewitness accounts describe finds that contradict accepted evolutionary timelines. Entire skeletons exceeding 10 or 12 feet in height, tools beyond contemporary technology, and inscriptions suggesting advanced knowledge appear repeatedly in these reports. Oddly, the researchers themselves often disappear from public record, reassigned or forbidden from publishing. Meanwhile, inconsistencies emerge across continents. Giant skeletons, megalithic structures, and unusual artifacts have been documented in the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. The patterns are too similar to dismiss entirely. Could there have been a deliberate effort to erase these traces from public knowledge? Oddly, these stories survive in newspapers, journals, and anecdotal accounts, leaving fragments of a puzzle that mainstream science avoids assembling. Some suggest institutional motives. If humanity's history were more complex than textbooks admit, if giants walked the earth, if hybrid beings existed, if advanced knowledge predates recorded civilization, then foundational narratives of evolution and human development would be challenged. Could the suppression of evidence be a way to maintain authority, to preserve a coherent timeline, and to protect the story of humanity as purely terrestrial? Meanwhile, odd discoveries continue to surface despite efforts to hide them. In remote deserts, deep caves, and underwater ruins, anomalies appear. Massive skeletal remains, tools carved with impossible precision, and bones fused with gold or ceremonial objects. Each find hints at a past both familiar and alien, a world where humans, giants, and perhaps other beings coexisted, yet was deliberately erased from the narrative. Oddly, myths and folklore often preserve what institutions attempt to conceal. Stories of giants, floods, and skyborne teachers appear in virtually every culture, suggesting collective memory retained truths hidden from formal history. Could this be humanity's way of keeping fragments of its origins alive, even when physical evidence vanishes? Meanwhile, the phenomenon is not merely historical. Reports of missing or hidden skeletons, forbidden tombs, and lost artifacts continue in modern times. Researchers note that when extraordinary evidence surfaces, it often disappears quickly, sometimes removed under the guise of scientific procedure, other times under obscure government directives. The patterns suggest a persistent effort to control the story of our origins. As one traces the threads of these vanishing clues, a stark question emerges. how much of humanity's past has been deliberately obscured. Oddly, even in the absence of physical evidence, the fragments that remain, myths, tablets, inscriptions, and eyewitness accounts, hint at a reality far more complex than evolutionary textbooks admit. A shadow history persists, waiting for those willing to look beyond the official narrative. The vanishing evidence challenges not just what we know, but how we know it. In the silence of sealed tombs, under layers of sediment, and in archives quietly closed, the past murmurs its secrets. And though much has been lost, the patterns, myths, and anomalies endure, daring us to question the story we have been told about who we are and what perhaps we once were. Beneath the golden sun of ancient cities, kings ascended thrones with crowns gleaming, scepters in hand, embodying power that seemed inherited from the heavens themselves. In Sumerian tablets, these rulers are described as chosen, beings infused with the essence of the Anunnaki, bearers of divine DNA, hybrids of mortal and celestial lineage. They were not merely leaders, they were living connections to forces beyond Earth, ordained to guide, control, and shape humanity. Mainstream historians consider kingship a human construct, a system to organize societies, enforce laws, and command loyalty. Yet the records themselves tell a more extraordinary story. Tablets from Nippur, Uruk, and Kish speak of rulers whose wisdom, longevity, and authority surpass ordinary human capacity. Oddly, these texts suggest their legitimacy came not from conquest alone, but from lineage, a direct infusion of the divine into their blood. Meanwhile, myth and legend reinforce the notion of sacred blood. Egyptian pharaohs claimed descent from Ra, the sun god. Kings of Babylon traced their ancestry to Anu and Enlil. In many Indo-European myths, rulers were semi-divine, their strength and wisdom set apart. Could these traditions reflect historical reality? Could certain families over millennia carry a genetic legacy of celestial beings, an inheritance deliberately cultivated to maintain power? Oddly, the implications extend beyond lineage. The idea of divine ancestry provides a framework for control. By claiming celestial connection, rulers justified authority, enforced obedience, and centralized power. Could the infusion of Anunnaki DNA, whether literal or symbolic, have created elites capable of commanding knowledge, strategy, and technology unavailable to ordinary humans? The pattern repeats across continents and eras, hinting at a global mechanism for maintaining hierarchy. Meanwhile, Sumerian records detail specific rituals for the chosen ones. Ceremonies reinforce their bond to the divine, embedding sacred knowledge, astronomical understanding, and societal codes. Some speculate that these rituals were designed to activate latent genetic or cognitive abilities, enhancing the ruler's capacity to govern. Oddly, echoes of these practices appear in later monarchies, from Egyptian coronations to medieval European rites, suggesting a continuity of esoteric instruction linked to power itself. Speculation deepens when considering intermarriage among royal houses. Bloodlines carefully preserved, connecting dynasties across regions, hint at the possibility of deliberate genetic consolidation. Could the ambition of rulers have been not only political, but biological? Oddly, even today, certain lineages carry myths of divine origin, their stories encoded in symbols, heirlooms, and ceremonial practices, suggesting that memory of celestial ancestry persists long after the gods themselves vanished. Meanwhile, the concept of the bloodline shapes civilization in profound ways. Laws, religion, and societal structures often revolve around the sacredness of rulership, reinforcing the distinction between ordinary humans and the divinely connected. Giants, watchers, and hybrids may have faded from memory, but their influence survives in the hierarchy, culture, and knowledge passed down through chosen rulers. Oddly, this may be one of the most enduring legacies of celestial intervention, not monuments nor artifacts, but living humans carrying the mark of the gods. Consider the curious coincidences in mythology. Biblical kings, from David to Solomon, often trace their ancestry to divine or extraordinary beings. Legends of long-lived rulers endowed with wisdom and power persist in cultures worldwide. Could these stories reflect historical truths rather than mere fantasy? Could humanity itself have been guided, genetically enhanced, and led by a small cadre of individuals chosen to bridge mortal and divine? Oddly, even in modern times, the fascination with royal bloodlines continues. Researchers, historians, and genealogists trace connections that stretch back millennia. Symbols of power, crowns, scepters, ceremonial artifacts often carry subtle references to stars, constellations, and celestial beings, as if encoded knowledge persists, waiting to be recognized. The pattern is unmistakable. Power has always been entwined with inheritance, with genetics, and perhaps with the influence of beings beyond Earth. Meanwhile, reflection brings an unsettling thought. If the bloodlines of kings are indeed tied to celestial visitors, the implications for humanity are profound. Civilization itself may be shaped not merely by human ingenuity, but by deliberate design, oversight, and selective inheritance. The rise and fall of empires, the concentration of knowledge and authority, may be part of a grander pattern, an echo of intervention, experimentation, and guidance that stretches back to the dawn of civilization. As one gazes upon the ruins of ancient palaces, ziggurats, and throne rooms, the line between history and myth blurs. Kings once walked the earth carrying the essence of beings who came from the stars. Their blood may have been their legacy, their knowledge the inheritance of a world touched by the divine. And even as empires crumble and civilizations fade, the story of the bloodline of kings endures, silent, subtle, and waiting to be understood. The Nile glimmers under the first light of dawn, casting a golden sheen across temples and pyramids, their shadows stretching like echoes of eternity. Carved into the walls, hieroglyphs tell of 7 divine figures, wise, immortal, and survivors of the Great Flood. Known as the 7 Sages, they are described as builders of civilization, keepers of secret knowledge, and guides for humanity emerging from catastrophe. Their story spans continents. Echoes of similar beings appear in Sumer, India, and Greece, suggesting a shared memory of those who shaped the foundations of human culture. Mainstream archaeology credits the pyramids to human ingenuity. Thousands of workers, ramps, and simple tools constructing marvels over decades. Yet the texts tell another story. The sages are credited with knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and sacred geometry far beyond the supposed capabilities of mortals. Oddly, their designs are precise, aligning perfectly with celestial bodies, solstices, and equinoxes, hinting at understanding not yet explained by conventional history. Meanwhile, the 7 sages appear under different names in multiple cultures. In Sumer, they are linked to the Apkallu, semi-divine teachers who instructed early humans. In India, the Saptarishi embody similar wisdom, guiding society in ritual, astronomy, and ethics. Oddly, these parallels suggest that these 7 figures, or their archetypal counterparts, were universal carriers of knowledge, transmitted across flood, migration, and memory. Could they be survivors of the same celestial intervention that shaped humanity in Sumer and Egypt? Odd facts surface in Egyptian records. Thoth, often associated with one of the sages, is depicted as a mediator between gods and humans, inventor of writing, and custodian of sacred knowledge. Many inscriptions link him to architectural plans, astronomy, and mystical numerology. Could the precision of the pyramids reflect not just human labor, but instruction from beings who retained pre-flood wisdom? The alignment of the Great Pyramid of Giza to true north, the proportions of its chambers, and its mathematical relationships all hint at knowledge deliberately encoded in stone. Meanwhile, ritual and legend reinforce the connection. The sages were said to initiate humans into secret knowledge, teaching agriculture, metallurgy, and governance. Oddly, their instructions were often accompanied by warnings: preserve wisdom carefully, hide dangerous truths, and encode knowledge in structures, texts, and symbols. Perhaps the pyramids themselves were not merely tombs, but repositories of information designed to survive the test of time. Speculation deepens when considering their possible identities. Could the seven sages be linked to the Watchers or Anunnaki described in Sumerian texts? Could Thoth, Hermes, and Enoch represent the same archetypal figure, one of the sages whose wisdom bridged civilizations and millennia? Oddly, their presence appears whenever humanity required guidance, emerging after floods, disasters, or cultural collapses, shaping society anew. Meanwhile, the role of sacred geometry becomes apparent. The pyramids, obelisks, and temples echo mathematical principles mirrored in the stars. Measurements, ratios, and alignments suggest not mere decoration, but encoded instructions, a language of structure and energy. Oddly, these principles appear consistently across ancient architecture worldwide, from Stonehenge to Teotihuacan, hinting at a shared knowledge network preserved by sages or their disciples. Some scholars argue that the seven sages were symbolic, representing the principles of civilization rather than actual beings. Yet, the consistency of their attributes across cultures, combined with archaeological evidence of precision, suggests something more tangible. Oddly, the same cultures that speak of divine builders also describe giants, celestial visitors, and hybrid humans, threads of a narrative that intertwine to form a hidden history beneath the surface of myth. Meanwhile, reflection reveals the enduring impact of the sages. They did not merely survive the flood, they shaped the rebirth of knowledge, culture, and human potential. Agriculture, writing, mathematics, and astronomy, all cornerstones of civilization, are attributed to their instruction. Oddly, their legacy persists not only in monuments but in encoded knowledge, guiding humanity long after their presence faded into legend. As the sun sets over Giza, casting shadows across pyramids aligned with stars, one can almost sense the presence of these seven figures, architects of civilization, carriers of pre-flood wisdom, and custodians of secrets too profound for ordinary memory. Their work bridges heaven and earth, myth and history, reminding us that some knowledge is preserved not in books alone, but in stone, alignment, and pattern. The seven sages endure as silent teachers. Their legacy whispers in the geometry of pyramids, the stars above, and the myths that span continents. And even as civilizations rise and fall, their wisdom remains encoded, waiting for those who can read the language of the ancients and understand the architects of human destiny. The ocean's surface shimmers under a pale sun, waves lapping gently against shores that do not exist on modern maps. Beneath the depths, some claim, lie cities swallowed by water, civilizations erased in a single cataclysm: Atlantis, Zep Tepi, Lemuria. Across continents and cultures, flood myths converge on a singular idea: a lost homeland, a cradle of knowledge and power, obliterated beneath the waves. Mainstream historians often dismiss these tales as allegory, a warning against pride or hubris. Yet odd facts persist. Ancient maps, like the Piri Reis chart and others preserved from antiquity, depict coastlines and landmasses that no longer exist. Geological evidence shows sudden rises in sea levels at the end of the last ice age, submerging large tracts of continental shelf that once supported human habitation. Could these submerged lands be the origin of the stories that became legend? Meanwhile, myth and archaeology intertwine. Egyptian texts speak of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods descended and civilization began. Plato recounts Atlantis as a highly advanced island, home to technology, wisdom, and culture that disappeared beneath the sea. Oddly, these stories share motifs: global floods, catastrophic destruction, and survivors carrying forbidden knowledge to distant lands. Could these legends be memories of real places lost to history, preserved only in myth? Submerged ruins off the coasts of the Mediterranean, Japan, and India hint at structures too regular to be natural. Streets, walls, and foundations lie hidden beneath sediment and salt water, often discovered during sonar surveys or accidental dredging. Some formations resemble city layouts, complete with avenues, plazas, and building footprints. Oddly, the alignment and sophistication suggest civilizations far older than conventional timelines allow, hinting at a people capable of architecture, astronomy, and planning on a massive scale. Meanwhile, flood myths themselves hint at survival and continuity. Atlantis's survivors, Zep-Tepi priests, and global flood heroes are credited with passing knowledge to emerging civilizations. Agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and governance may have been preserved in secret, encoded in myths, monuments, and ritual. Oddly, this aligns with the 7 sages of Egypt and the Anunnaki narratives of Sumer, suggesting that survivors of these cataclysms spread wisdom to shape the rebirth of human societies. Some researchers argue that these lost lands explain sudden leaps in knowledge and technology seen in post-flood civilizations. Megalithic architecture, astronomical precision, and the rise of city-states occur abruptly in the archaeological record, suggesting that seeds of civilization may have been transplanted from a forgotten homeland. Oddly, the same regions repeatedly appear in myths as centers of origin, an echo of memory across oceans and generations. Meanwhile, the notion of a global cataclysm gains support from geology. Submerged river valleys, terraces, and coastal settlements indicate sudden inundation events. Tsunamis, tectonic shifts, or rapid glacial melting could have obliterated entire populations. Oddly, the consistency of myths describing this destruction hints at shared human memory of real events, catastrophes witnessed and encoded in story before they faded from physical memory. Speculation deepens when considering the cultural transmission. Could the survivors of these lost islands have been the same hybrid beings, giants, or sages that guided humanity after the Great Flood? Their influence may explain similarities in pyramid construction, sacred geometry, and mythology across continents. Oddly, the narrative threads of giants, divine rulers, and lost homelands weave together, suggesting a continuity of memory preserved in story, ritual, and architecture. The lost island beneath the waves remains a haunting idea. Sonar and satellite imagery hint at submerged structures. Legends hint at civilizations of remarkable skill and knowledge. Oddly, even today, maritime explorers and researchers continue to report anomalies. Stone foundations, terraces, and submerged roads, waiting silently beneath the sea, just beyond reach. As the sun dips below the horizon, the water becomes a mirror to the sky, hiding entire civilizations below its surface. The Lost Island is more than myth. It is a reminder that history may be deeper, older, and more mysterious than we have been taught. Atlantis, Zep-Tepi, Lemuria, they may all be fragments of a real place, a cradle of humanity erased by water, yet never fully forgotten. Beneath the waves, cities slumber. Their streets, temples, and monuments await rediscovery. And perhaps, somewhere within the memory of myth, the truth of the Lost Island endures, hidden, submerged, and echoing across time, calling us to remember the world that once existed before the waters claimed it. The night sky can be both serene and terrifying. Imagine a darkness pierced by streaks of fire, glowing disks hovering, or a sun that blazes with unnatural intensity. Across cultures and epochs, humanity has recorded these phenomena in myths, legends, and sacred texts. Fire chariots, heavenly eyes, and celestial wars, images that suggest the sky itself was alive and perhaps violent. Could these visions be symbolic, or do they represent actual events that reshaped the Earth and humanity's memory of the divine? Mainstream science attributes these stories to natural phenomena, comets blazing across the heavens, meteor strikes, solar storms, or auroral displays. Yet odd facts persist. Some cosmic events coincide with dramatic shifts in climate, mass extinctions, or floods recorded in geological layers. Could these fires in the sky have been triggers for cataclysmic events, events later mythologized as the wrath or intervention of gods? Meanwhile, myths across the world describe the heavens in motion. In Sumerian texts, gods ride fiery vehicles that descend from the stars. In India, the Vedas speak of vimanas, flying chariots that blaze across the sky. Norse sagas recount flaming wheels tearing through the firmament. Oddly, the imagery is remarkably consistent: celestial fire, movement, and divine agency, suggesting shared memory of extraordinary events observed and passed down through generations. Some researchers propose that comets or asteroids may have caused localized or even global destruction. The Younger Dryas event, around 12,000 years ago, coincides with abrupt climate change and sudden collapses in early human settlements. Could fire streaking through the sky have been part of a celestial mechanism that triggered floods, fires, or volcanic activity? Oddly, ancient accounts frequently pair fire from the heavens with water and chaos on Earth, hinting at a direct correlation between observation and memory. Meanwhile, celestial fire may also explain human perception of divine visitation. When a brilliant comet arcs across the sky, its tail glowing like molten gold, or when a meteor storm lights up the night, ancient humans might interpret this as gods descending. Could the fiery chariots of myth represent actual objects in the sky, later woven into religious and cultural narratives? Oddly, in some cases, petroglyphs and carvings appear to depict objects remarkably similar to modern interpretations of comets or meteors, suggesting precise observation, not mere imagination. Speculation deepens when considering solar and cosmic phenomena. Massive solar flares, coronal mass ejections, or shifts in Earth's magnetic field could have created intense auroras, storms, and even atmospheric fire. Could these have contributed to memories of wrathful gods, celestial battles, or divine punishment? Oddly, some ancient texts describe the sky itself as being on fire, stars falling like rain, or entire heavens ablaze, descriptions that resonate with extreme cosmic events beyond ordinary meteor showers. Meanwhile, the symbolism of fire and destruction ties to renewal and warning. Fire in the sky is often followed in myths by floods, famine, or cultural reset, a purging of corruption, a clearing of the slate. Could celestial events, comets, or asteroids have been the catalysts for the Great Deluge, the erasure of early civilizations, and the transformation of human society? Oddly, this pattern repeats across continents, in legends separated by thousands of miles, suggesting either shared experience or extraordinary coincidence. Some researchers connect these events to the stories of the Anunnaki and other celestial visitors. Perhaps what ancient humans interpreted as divine fire was in fact intervention, ships, instruments, or phenomena originating beyond Earth. Oddly, the combination of natural celestial events with the mythology of gods descending from the heavens creates a tapestry in which memory, observation, and interpretation blend, giving rise to both history and legend. Meanwhile, as science uncovers more about cosmic hazards, near-Earth objects, solar flares, and asteroid impacts, the past begins to mirror the mythic record. Perhaps our ancestors were witnesses to a universe far more volatile than we imagine, and the stories of fire in the sky are echoes of real, catastrophic events. Oddly, in each account there is both awe and fear, as if humanity understood instinctively that the heavens are powerful, unpredictable, and capable of reshaping life on Earth. As the sky darkens and stars emerge, it is possible to sense the continuum of human memory, the fear, the wonder, and the reverence for the celestial forces that once dominated the imagination of every culture. fire in the sky is not merely spectacle. It is a memory encoded in myth, a warning carried across generations, and a reminder that our connection to the cosmos is ancient, profound, and sometimes dangerous. The heavens themselves tell a story of power, destruction, and renewal, and perhaps, hidden within the myths of fire and celestial chariots, lies a record of events that shaped the course of humanity, linking gods, disasters, and memory in a tapestry that stretches from the stars to the earth. The night sky is quiet now, yet hidden beyond the veil of stars, some speak of a celestial wanderer, a planet that returns like clockwork, herald of upheaval, known to the ancients as Nibiru, the destroyer. Texts from Sumer, Babylon, and beyond describe its passage as a harbinger of chaos, fire in the heavens, storms upon the earth, and waters rising to engulf entire civilizations. Could such a planet, orbiting far beyond ordinary observation, be the cause of humanity's cyclical collapses and forgotten cataclysms? Mainstream astronomy dismisses Nibiru as myth or misinterpretation. Yet odd facts persist. Ancient records repeatedly link celestial events to floods, earthquakes, and societal collapse. The pattern is precise. Roughly every few thousand years, cultures speak of upheaval, loss of knowledge, and the need to rebuild. Could these be encoded memories of a real, recurring cosmic phenomenon? Meanwhile, myths are remarkably consistent. The Sumerians recorded gods arriving from the sky, wielding power over weather, floods, and the earth itself. In Babylon, texts describe fiery omens preceding calamity. Oddly, similar stories appear in the Americas, India, and even Northern Europe. Floods, storms, and celestial disturbances synchronized with the supposed orbital cycle of a massive celestial body. Could Nibiru's return explain these shared memories? Some researchers suggest its influence could be gravitational, triggering tectonic shifts, tsunamis, and sudden climate change. Others propose that comets or debris accompanying Nibiru's passage could have set fire to the skies, igniting the myths of fire chariots and heavenly eyes. Oddly, these descriptions echo earlier accounts of the Watchers and their interventions, intertwining celestial events with divine narratives. Meanwhile, the symbolism is clear. The return of the destroyer represents both fear and opportunity. In myth, destruction is followed by renewal. Survivors carry knowledge, rebuild, and spread wisdom to new generations. Could this cyclical pattern account for the sudden leaps in knowledge, the rise and fall of civilizations, and the repeated emergence of advanced societies after cataclysms? Oddly, history may not be linear, but cyclical, dictated in part by forces beyond our ordinary perception. Ancient texts describe Nibiru not merely as a planet, but as a harbinger, a messenger, or even a tool of divine oversight. Its approach is said to shake the heavens and the earth, scattering those who oppose cosmic order. Could these records be allegorical, or are they literal observations of astronomical events tied to real-world disasters? Oddly, both interpretations align with the recurring collapses and resets in human history. Meanwhile, some scholars suggest that knowledge of Nibiru's cycles was encoded deliberately in mythology, architecture, and astronomy. Temples, ziggurats, and pyramids align with stars in ways that could have served as celestial calendars, marking the approach of the destroyer. Oddly, the ancients may have possessed a science of cosmic timing, knowledge that warns of events capable of erasing entire civilizations. The consequences of such a return are profound. Floods, fires, and social upheaval would challenge the continuity of knowledge and technology. Oddly, survivors, whether giants, sages, or hybrid humans, may have been responsible for preserving culture, passing it forward after each cyclical purge. The narrative of humanity, then, is one of resilience, reconstruction, and memory encoded in myths, monuments, and bloodlines. Meanwhile, reflection suggests a subtle warning. the destroyer is not just a story of the past. Its pattern may persist. Ancient texts speak of its orbit, its effects, and the preparation required to survive. Oddly, modern humans, disconnected from these traditions, may be repeating the cycles unknowingly, blind to the rhythms of the heavens that once dictated the fate of civilizations. As the stars wheel overhead, the tale of Nibiru reminds us that humanity's history may be far older, more complex, and more vulnerable than we imagine. Every myth, flood, and cataclysm could be a reflection of celestial events written into collective memory, a cosmic pattern repeating itself across millennia. And perhaps, somewhere in the silent movements of the sky, the destroyer waits, a reminder that the heavens are not passive spectators, but active forces shaping the story of Earth. The return of the destroyer is more than legend. It is a memory of cycles, catastrophe, and renewal, a pattern woven into the fabric of time, urging humanity to remember, to observe, and perhaps to prepare. The heavens hold secrets, and in their motion, the echoes of past civilizations whisper, waiting for those who will finally listen. The desert stretches endlessly, golden sands rippling under the sun's glare. Among these dunes, monuments rise, pyramids, temples, and obelisks, silent witnesses to a time when knowledge was sacred and carefully guarded. Ancient texts speak of Thoth, Hermes, and Enoch, figures who walked the earth bearing wisdom too profound to remain in ordinary hands. They taught, they guided, and then, as mysteriously as they appeared, they vanished, leaving behind symbols, inscriptions, and structures that encode truths still waiting to be understood. Mainstream history often portrays these figures as myth, allegory, or legend. Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing, Hermes, the messenger of the Greek pantheon, and Enoch, the Hebrew patriarch who walked with the divine, each disappears from the historical record, leaving only fragmented accounts of their teachings. Yet odd facts persist. Across continents, patterns emerge. Writing systems, advanced calendars, astronomical alignments, and sacred geometry hint at knowledge far beyond the recorded capabilities of ancient humans. Meanwhile, their legacies appear in monuments themselves. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for instance, is more than a tomb. It is a repository of mathematical, astronomical, and symbolic information. Oddly, its dimensions encode knowledge of Pi, the Earth's circumference and celestial alignments, wisdom that seems deliberate, precise, and timeless. Could this be a message left by those who understood the cosmos better than we do today? Speculation deepens when considering the similarities across cultures. The wisdom of Thoth resonates in Egyptian texts, Hermes in Greek traditions, Enoch in Hebrew writings. Each is described as a teacher, scribe, or guide, responsible for passing down divine insight while preserving secrets for the future. Oddly, these figures may represent archetypes of a single influence, custodians of knowledge who moved among civilizations, leaving encoded lessons in architecture, symbols, and story. Meanwhile, myths and esoteric texts hint at the purpose of such preservation. Knowledge of the stars, mathematics, medicine, and governance was carefully layered into rituals, monuments, and oral tradition. Oddly, much of this knowledge was hidden in plain sight, accessible only to those trained to read the language of the gods, to interpret symbols, and to understand alignment with the cosmos. Could these encoded systems be a test, a way of ensuring wisdom would be discovered only when humanity was ready? Some scholars point to Enoch's writings, Thoth's scrolls, and Hermes' teachings as more than spiritual allegory. Their knowledge encompasses astronomy, the cycles of the Earth, ethics, and possibly technologies long lost. Oddly, similar principles appear in Sumerian, Mayan, and Indian civilizations, suggesting a continuity of insight that defies time, geography, and conventional historical understanding. Meanwhile, reflection reveals a subtle pattern. The gods, or their representatives, disappeared at moments of crisis after teaching what was necessary to preserve civilization. Oddly, their absence is as meaningful as their presence. They leave behind structures, texts, and symbols designed to outlast generations, guiding humanity indirectly through encoded memory. Pyramids, megaliths, and temples may be more than architecture. They are instruction manuals carved in stone. Speculation expands to consider modern implications. Could rediscovering this lost knowledge unlock advancements in science, technology, or understanding of human potential? Oddly, myths, symbols, and monuments provide clues, waiting for interpretation. The challenge is recognizing them as messages, rather than merely artifacts, and connecting the fragmented pieces left by beings whose comprehension of the cosmos exceeded ordinary human understanding. Meanwhile, the endurance of these legacies is striking. Despite floods, wars, and the erosion of time, the monuments, texts, and myths survive. Oddly, the consistency of knowledge encoded in structures, symbols, and rituals across civilizations suggests deliberate preservation, rather than coincidence. The gods may have trusted that, over millennia, humanity would awaken to these truths when capable of understanding them. As the sun sets behind pyramids and ziggurats, the shadows stretch across stone surfaces carved with care, precision, and intention. One can almost sense the presence of the lost teachers, their wisdom woven into the fabric of civilization. Oddly, the signs are everywhere, if only one knows how to read them. They challenge us to question what we consider myth, to see patterns beyond the obvious, and to recognize that knowledge was never truly lost. It was deliberately hidden, awaiting rediscovery. Thoth, Hermes, and Enoch endure as guardians of a hidden past. Their wisdom, encoded in stone, story, and symbol, whispers across the millennia. And perhaps, when humanity is ready, the secrets they left behind will illuminate the truths of the cosmos, the Earth, and our own potential as a species touched, however briefly, by the divine. From the earliest settlements along riverbanks to sprawling empires carved across continents, the story of humanity is one of rise, triumph, and inevitable decline. Cities grow, knowledge accumulates, and then, for reasons often lost to memory, civilizations collapse, leaving only echoes and ruins, myths, and fragments of texts. Oddly, this pattern repeats across time and space, suggesting a rhythm, an unseen pulse guiding the fate of humankind. Mainstream history attributes these cycles to climate change, war, disease, and human error. Yet when we examine myths, legends, and ancient records, a striking similarity emerges. Creation stories, divine rebellion, cataclysmic floods, and the emergence of heroes recur again and again. Oddly, these motifs appear independently across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, from Mesopotamia to the Americas, from Egypt to India, hinting at either shared experience or perhaps a pattern embedded in our collective memory. Meanwhile, the rise of knowledge often follows catastrophe. Survivors inherit fragments of wisdom from those who came before, preserving what they can. Oddly, the legends of Thoth, Hermes, and Enoch illustrate this precisely. Divine teachers, hybrid beings, or celestial intermediaries guiding humanity after floods and disasters, ensuring that the foundations of civilization endure, even if much is lost. Speculation deepens when considering cosmic cycles. Fire from the heavens, celestial bodies like Nibiru, and comets all appear in myth as agents of destruction, yet also as catalysts for rebirth. Oddly, these narratives suggest that humanity's progress is not linear but punctuated, shaped by forces beyond ordinary observation. Each rise, each collapse becomes a chapter in a story written by both human action and external influence, blurring the lines between free will and design. Meanwhile, the pattern extends to power, bloodlines, and the guardianship of knowledge. Chosen rulers, hybrid progeny, and the secret teachings preserved in myths temples, and monuments all point to deliberate stewardship, an effort to guide humanity across cycles of destruction and rebirth. Oddly, the echoes of giants, the Watchers, and lost sages hint that our ancestors may have understood these cycles and worked to prepare the next generation for survival and growth. Odd facts emerge when myths and archaeology intersect. Flood layers and sediments, submerged ruins, and megalithic structures coincide with stories of cataclysm and reconstruction. The same celestial events that terrified ancient peoples left their mark in both physical records and narrative memory. Oddly, this dual evidence, myth and material, suggests that history, legend, and cosmic forces are intertwined, each shaping human consciousness over millennia. Meanwhile, reflection reveals a profound question. Are these patterns the result of human nature alone, repeating mistakes and triumphs, or the influence of higher intelligences guiding, observing, or intervening? Oddly, the answer may lie not in certainty but in observation, recognizing that the repetition of motifs, the persistence of myths, and the survival of knowledge across disasters are far too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. Speculation turns contemplative. Could humanity itself be part of a long experiment, a species observed and occasionally nudged by forces beyond ordinary comprehension? Oddly, the cycles of creation, rebellion, flood, and rebirth appear to be both human and divine, our history encoded with layers of meaning, warning, and opportunity. Each collapse is not just an ending, but a chance to start anew, carrying fragments of wisdom preserved across the ages. Meanwhile, as one gazes upon the ruins of forgotten cities, the submerged remnants of lost lands, and the monuments that align with stars, the enormity of time becomes tangible. Oddly, the past is never entirely gone. It survives in stone, story, bloodline, and memory. Civilization may rise and fall, but the echoes endure, waiting for recognition, reflection, and understanding. Ultimately, the pattern of civilization is a mirror, reflecting both human nature and the possibility of guidance from beyond. It challenges us to consider our place in history, to learn from repetition, and to recognize that the cycles we inherit are both inheritance and responsibility. Oddly, within these rhythms lie the potential for insight, resilience, and awakening. A reminder that though humanity forgets, it may also remember, if we are willing to listen. As the sun sets over ancient ruins, casting long shadows across stone and sand, the story comes full circle. Creation, rebellion, flood, and rebirth. Echoes of the past that continue to shape the present. Oddly, the lessons are clear. History is both teacher and mirror, revealing the cyclical patterns of civilization and whispering that perhaps the future is not fixed, but waiting for humanity to recognize the forces, human or divine, that have always guided it. In the end, the pattern endures. The past is written not just in textbooks but in myth, monument, and memory. And if we pay attention, the cycles of civilization may yet reveal the truth of who we are, how we came to be, and what forces, seen or unseen, have shaped the journey of humanity across the ages. The night sky stretches endlessly above, a canvas of black velvet speckled with stars. Each point of light is a sun, a world, a possibility. As humans, we have always looked upward, wondering if we are alone, if someone or something watches from beyond. Perhaps the answer has always been there, hidden in myth, history, and the very memory of our civilization. Mainstream science suggests we are the product of evolution, a solitary species navigating a lonely universe. Yet odd facts and ancient records whisper a different story. Myths of gods descending, celestial visitors, and hybrid humans appear on every continent. Temples, pyramids, and monuments encode knowledge that seems beyond ordinary human ingenuity. Could it be that humanity's story is intertwined with forces that came from the stars? Meanwhile, ancient texts continue to echo across millennia. The Anunnaki, the Watchers, Enoch, Thoth, and Hermes all hint at contact with beings who guided, shaped, and even altered humanity. Oddly, these narratives converge across cultures. Despite vast distances and isolated societies, the parallels are too striking to ignore. Knowledge, power, and wisdom descending from the heavens, leaving imprints in our genetics, architecture, and collective memory. Speculation grows when we consider the possibility that we are not merely descendants of earthbound evolution. Could humanity be the product of deliberate design, a hybrid of human and otherworldly influence? Oddly, the stories of giants, divine rulers, and advanced civilizations that vanished suddenly all hint at a shared memory, a record of intervention, guidance, and forgotten knowledge. Meanwhile, reflection suggests something deeper. Perhaps the myths of gods, angels, and celestial teachers are not just tales. They are reminders of a truth too extraordinary for ordinary remembrance. Knowledge was preserved in symbols, texts, and stone, waiting for those capable of understanding. Oddly, even today, the patterns remain. Sacred geometry, astronomical alignments, and encoded wisdom persist, offering a bridge between the past and the present. Consider the recurring cycle: creation, rebellion, flood, rebirth. Civilizations rise, flourish, and fall, yet the echoes remain. Oddly, each time humanity rebuilds, fragments of ancient wisdom resurface, guiding us anew. Perhaps this cycle is not random, but orchestrated by higher intelligences, or perhaps it is embedded in our nature, an imprint of experiences from before memory began. Meanwhile, we gaze at the stars as our ancestors did, wondering what truths lie beyond. Each constellation, comet, and planetary orbit carries stories encoded in observation and imagination. Oddly, these celestial patterns mirror myths on Earth, connecting human experience to cosmic phenomena in ways that science and legend both hint at but cannot fully explain. Speculation blends with awe. If the gods, watchers, and sages truly existed, their influence may still linger within us. Our curiosity, creativity, and drive to explore may be the inheritance of a lineage touched by beings from beyond. Oddly, the echoes of their presence may guide us still, nudging humanity toward discovery, understanding, and the rediscovery of truths long hidden. Meanwhile, one cannot help but wonder if the mysteries of the past are not lost, but waiting for humanity to connect the dots, to read the patterns, and to remember that we may be descendants of something greater than ourselves. Perhaps the stories, myths, and monuments left behind are a roadmap, a subtle reminder that our origins are far more extraordinary than conventional history allows. The stars above seem to pulse with possibility. Each glimmer is a question, a memory, a challenge. Are we alone, or were we always meant to remember that we were never alone? Oddly, the answers may lie not in new worlds or distant galaxies, but in ourselves, in our history, our myths, our genes, and the enduring whispers of the beings who came before. As the night deepens, silence settles across Earth, and a quiet voice rises in thought. Perhaps the truth of our origin is not lost, only waiting to be remembered, recognized, and understood. Humanity has always looked up at the stars. Perhaps now we are ready to see who or what has been watching back all along.